for the majority of my life, a narrative was perpetuated in my mind by those who did not have my best interests at heart. I was being conditioned, colonized, prepared to serve the status quo. I reflect now, for those here, on how vastly different my mentality has become. I recognized early the importance of remembering, of asking questions, of acquiring knowledge, and of developing objective, solid reasoning. From a young age, I knew not everything was as it seemed. One of my most cherished examples follows. I willingly open these sides of myself to the world, because I believe this ability, to seek truth, to unveil, to question, is dearly needed at this critical moment, as we stand at the apex of a post-war society. My father's side of the family were immigrant refugees. During World War II, they were forced to flee as the Soviet Union, under Stalin, took over. This occurred shortly after the Wehrmacht lost control of the newly formed Croatian state. Some context. As early as 7 years old, I have a fond memory of a photo, an image of a handsome man in uniform. At the time, I had no idea the uniform was German. It sat on my great-grandmother's piano. As we played together, I would ask who he was and why he was important. Great-grandma was never reluctant to share. She told me he went missing in action during World War II and was never seen again. I asked for more, but I never got much. I presumed it to be too painful for her, too traumatic. Perhaps, in her mind, withholding those details was for my benefit, considering all that had transpired in the Ustase state. I knew my great-grandmother missed her homeland. Walking into her home always felt otherworldly. The charm of the old country was alive within her walls. She was a master in the kitchen, always cooking dishes passed down for generations. These recipes, deeply rooted, heavily guarded, were a gift, a taste of a world lost yet alive through tradition. I savored them, knowing they carried the weight of multi-generational knowledge. Now, I am uncovering more. When I study history, I become disembodied. In a way, I time travel, using what feels like astral projection or sensory deprivation. This has its difficulties. I often lose track of physical objects, keys, wallets, headphones. Others might call this daydreaming, but it is far more than that. It is a process, an ability, one that allows me to absorb the energy of a time and place, to question deeply, to penetrate the layers of understanding. The hard questions bring forth equilibrium. This requires flipping esoteric continents. If you think this is easy, by all means, try it. The Ustase timeline, the atrocities committed during this time, against religious groups, against alternative cultures, were set forth by the orthodox policies of the vassal Ustase state. This is not a history book, nor will I get into the specifics of the perpetrators. This is about the loss of critical family culture and history. It is about how crucial it is to recognize the moment when one must act to obtain information. It is about awareness, the awareness that understanding and preserving knowledge is a trait seldom developed in the continental United States. The point here is simple: remembering is not considered a necessity in modern America. In fact, it seems almost encouraged to forget, to replace traditional values, to abandon old world traditions, to sever the deep connections to bloodlines that span centuries. Whether we speak of second or third generation immigrants, or of those whose ancestry has forged the landscapes we see today, there is a pattern. A pattern of erasure. A pattern of mismanagement, of exploitation by those in the highest commands. But let's stay on point. On the fact of discovery, sensitive information from WW2 is still to this day, closely guarded. These documents, tied to secrecy, technology, and narrative control, hold immense power. Nazi records, in particular, are some of the most sensitive and censored materials in existence. Simply seeking them, asking questions, or even engaging in subjective discussions about them carries incredible risk. Merely uttering the word Nazi is enough to trigger an immediate reaction, an ADL mentality and a multi-layered onslaught of propaganda, designed to shift the unaware into fight or flight mode. Yet, at the same time, you're free to slaughter Nazi zombies in the latest Call of Duty installment, a game developed by Infinity Ward, a small yet glaring example of the culture we exist in today. The struggle for access. It is truly unfortunate, at least for me, that in order to uncover historical records of my family's existence during World War II, I am forced to sift through recently declassified documents, maneuver through bureaucratic red tape, or subject myself to the rigid, prepackaged narrative imposed upon anyone who dares to engage with the word Nazi outside of the accepted context. Transparency. Objectivity. Both are nearly non-existent. That era was one of extermination, liquidation, a winner takes all, and you'll never be a loser again paradox. And yet, instead of reconciling this history with any degree of honesty, we see a continuous recycling of unhealed trauma. DNA trauma, very real, very measurable, coursing through the bloodlines of those deemed losers. Instead of resolution, a carefully curated cycle of self-destruction and self-hatred is imposed. The consequence? A subconscious rematch, set on an endless loop. And in this perspective, nobody won. The war ended, but nothing was resolved. The can was merely kicked further down the road, into an era where corporate trendsetters seek to profit off the very trauma they refuse to acknowledge. Where identity, purpose, land, and sanity were stripped from entire generations, leaving behind only fragments, whispers, and fading recollections. Why so sensitive? Are they afraid of letting people access this information easily? Why the sensitivity? That's the real question, isn't it? Why hide anything if it's truly no big deal? Why obscure the past if everything aligns with the story we're told? Or is there something buried within those records that would overturn everything we think we know? I wasn't looking to dismantle the vaults of the Vatican, I was simply searching for my family history. And I have every right to know it. What's left of it, anyway. Now, with these sentiments, one might assume I am defending a culture. I am not. I recognize the weight of history, the unspeakable atrocities embedded in the collective consciousness. I am defending the right to speak about them. The right to have an open dialogue. A right that all so-called civilized, non-savage beings should be practicing. Therefore, I will continue.